It's funny how a single piece of paper can shatter your entire world. For me, it was a receipt I found while doing laundry, a simple Tiffany and Company receipt for a $12,000 diamond necklace. My 20th wedding anniversary was months away, and Christmas had just passed. As I stood there in my pristine laundry room, holding that receipt with trembling hands, 15 years of hints and clues suddenly clicked into place. The late night calls, the business trips, the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume. I remember thinking how ironic it was that I had just made Drake's favorite pasta sauce, his grandmother's recipe that I'd perfected over 2 decades of marriage. The sauce was simmering on the stove while my world quietly imploded. My daughter Luna's voice floated down from upstairs, asking about her blue sweater, and I answered on autopilot, slipping the receipt into my pocket like a time bomb. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't even the betrayal that hurt the most. It was the moment my 14-year-old son Phoenix walked into the kitchen, looked at the empty chair where his father should have been, and didn't even ask where he was. My children had grown used to their father's absences, his excuses, his working late texts. I had raised them to be understanding, supportive, patient, all the things I was slowly realizing I should have been less of. The doorbell changed everything. When Luna opened it, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Sienna, Drake's new secretary, 25 years old, with the kind of beauty that made me suddenly aware of every laugh line on my face. I had met her once at the firm's Christmas party, caught the way Drake's eyes followed her across the room. I had dismissed it then, tagged it as harmless flirting. After all, he was Drake Sullivan, the brilliant corporate lawyer who had chosen me, his law school sweetheart, to build a perfect life with. But there she stood in my foyer, mascara streaking her perfect cheeks, wearing a familiar diamond necklace that caught the late afternoon light. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, clutching a manila envelope. "But you need to know. He promised he would tell you, but—" The envelope contained copies of everything: the apartment lease, the transfers from our joint accounts, the divorce papers he was planning to serve me with next week. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Working late, don't wait up." The same text he'd sent countless times before. I looked at my children's confused faces, at the crying mistress on my doorstep, at the life I had spent 20 years perfecting crumbling around my designer boots. The sauce was definitely burning now, filling the house with the acrid smell of endings. I'd like to say I broke down, threw things, caused a scene, but 2 decades of being the perfect corporate wife had taught me composure above all else. I thanked Sienna for her honesty, asked her to leave, and turned off the stove. Then I gathered my children close and told them the truth, that their father had chosen a different path, that our lives were about to change, that we would survive this together. What I didn't tell them was that our joint accounts were nearly empty, that their private school tuition was due next month, that their father had systematically dismantled our financial security while building a new life with his young secretary. I didn't tell them that their mother, with her impressive law degree and 2 decades of managing charity galas, had no idea how to support a family on her own. But here's what I want you to understand. That night, as I sat in my walk-in closet surrounded by designer clothes I could no longer afford, something inside me shifted. The diamond necklace that should have been mine had instead become a key, unlocking a door I never knew existed. I just didn't know yet that it would lead me from making lattes at minimum wage to running a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. They say success is the best revenge, but they never tell you how much that revenge costs along the way. This is the story of how I paid that price and why it was worth every penny. The first month after Drake left, I became an expert at pretending everything was fine during school drop-offs, pretending I wasn't terrified when I checked our empty bank accounts, pretending I knew what I was doing as I filled out job applications for the first time in 15 years. The diamond necklace around Sienna's neck probably cost more than what I had left in my savings. My first job interview was at a local cafe. I still remember sitting there in my Chanel suit, the same one I'd worn to Drake's firm's partnership celebration, watching the 20-something manager try to find a polite way to tell me I was overqualified yet underexperienced. "Have you ever operated an espresso machine, Mrs. Sullivan?" "No, but I had organized million-dollar charity galas." "Any experience in customer service?" "Only if you counted 2 decades of smoothing ruffled feathers at corporate events. The day I traded my designer heels for non-slip shoes and put on that barista apron was the day reality truly hit. Luna found me in my closet that evening, surrounded by designer clothes I was listing on consignment websites. My brilliant, beautiful 16-year-old sat down beside me and started helping me photograph Gucci bags and Louboutin shoes. "Mom," she said, folding a silk blouse with careful hands, "I got a part-time job at the library, and I can switch to public school. Phoenix, too." That was the moment that broke me. Not Drake's betrayal, not the empty accounts, not even Sienna's tearful confession, but my teenage daughter offering to help shoulder our family's burden. I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "No, sweetheart, you focus on your studies. Let me handle this." But handling it meant swallowing my pride 3 times over. Morning shifts at the cafe, afternoon work as a virtual assistant, and evening coding classes at the community center. I chose coding because it was the furthest thing from my old life, from the polished corporate wife who had hosted dinner parties and attended board meetings on her husband's arm. The first time I saw them together in public, Drake and Sienna, was during my morning shift at the cafe. They walked past the window, her hand resting on his arm exactly the way mine used to, both of them laughing about something. I was covered in coffee stains and smelled like steamed milk, and for a moment our eyes met through the glass. The flicker of recognition, then dismissal, in his gaze hurt worse than the divorce papers he'd finally served. Phoenix stopped speaking to his father entirely. My quiet, thoughtful 14-year-old withdrew into himself, his silence louder than any tantrum. I found him one night sitting in Drake's old home office staring at a family photo from happier times. "He has a new family now, doesn't he?" my son asked, his voice cracking. "That's why he took all the money. He needed it for his new life." I wanted to protect my children from these harsh truths, but life had other plans. The whispers at their private school grew louder. The invitations to birthday parties and play dates dwindled. Former friends crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations. Our fall from grace was spectacularly public, and in our social circle, poverty was apparently more contagious than scandal. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom: you learn who you really are. The woman who had spent 20 years being Mrs. Drake Sullivan was disappearing, and someone else was emerging from the ashes. Someone who stayed up late studying JavaScript after double shifts. Someone who learned to make the perfect latte while mentally debugging code. Someone who was discovering that she was capable of far more than being the perfect wife. I didn't know it then, but rock bottom was about to become my foundation. And the moment that would change everything was walking through the cafe door, ordering a complicated drink, and noticing the coding textbook hidden under my counter. But that's getting ahead of the story. First, let me tell you about the day I realized that starting over didn't mean giving up. It meant getting even. They say necessity is the mother of invention. In my case, necessity made me a master of time management. Wake up at 4 a.m., study coding before my cafe shift, work until 2 p.m., handle virtual assistant tasks during breaks, attend evening coding classes, then stay up late helping Luna with college applications. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. But something unexpected happened during those exhausting days. I discovered I was good at coding, really good. It was during one of my morning shifts that I met Rita Chen, though I didn't know then that she would change my life. She ordered the most complicated drink on our menu while reading something on her tablet. I was still new enough to fumble with the espresso machine, and when I apologized for the delay, she just smiled and asked what I thought about the JavaScript function displayed on her screen. I didn't even think before responding, explaining how I would have written the code differently to make it more efficient. It wasn't until I finished that I realized I'd just critiqued the work of Rita Chen, CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. The same Rita Chen I'd politely ignored at countless charity galas, back when I was too busy being the perfect corporate wife to notice that she was building an empire. Interesting, she said, studying me over her reading glasses. Most beginners wouldn't catch that optimization opportunity. How long have you been coding? 3 months, I replied, trying to wipe coffee stains from my apron. Between shifts. That's when she noticed my name tag and her eyes widened with recognition. Ariadne Sullivan? Drake Sullivan's wife? Ex-wife, I corrected, fighting the familiar sting. Now I'm just me. What happened next still feels like a dream. Rita pulled up a chair at my counter during my break, and I found myself telling her everything about finding the receipt, about the necklace, about starting over at 43. She listened without judgment, occasional typing something on her tablet. Your ex-husband's firm handles most of our competitors' contracts, she said finally. I've sat across from him in negotiations. Never liked his approach. She paused, then smiled. How would you like to beat him at his own game? That evening, I sat with my children at our kitchen table, no longer in the mansion, but in the small apartment we now called home. Luna was working on her Stanford application essay while Phoenix scrolled through his phone. Mom, Phoenix said suddenly, Dad's getting married. It's all over social media. He turned his phone to show me the engagement announcement. There was the necklace gleaming around Sienna's neck in their professional photos. I expected pain, but instead felt something different stirring in my chest. Actually, I said, pulling out the business card Rita had given me, I have some news too. How would you both feel about your mom becoming a tech executive? Luna looked up from her essay, really looked at me for the first time in months. Is that even possible? I thought about Rita's offer, a fast-track training program followed by a junior developer position. The salary was less than what I used to spend on seasonal wardrobe updates, but it was a start. More importantly, it was a future. Anything's possible, I said, remembering how Drake used to laugh at my inability to program our home theater system. Sometimes you just need someone to believe in you before you can believe in yourself. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at my small desk surrounded by coding books. My virtual assistant job had taught me to recognize opportunity, and my barista experience had taught me humility. Now, looking at the simple lines of code on my laptop screen, I felt something I hadn't experienced since law school. The thrill of mastering something new, of building something from nothing. My phone buzzed with a text from Drake. Heard you're working at a cafe. Let me know if you need help with the kids' expenses. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my coding editor and began to write, each line of code another step away from the woman who had once measured her worth by the size of her husband's success. Little did Drake know, his young secretary wasn't the only one about to wear something new around her neck. But unlike diamonds, success is something no one can take away from you. 6 months into my new life at Rita's company, I found myself staring at code until my eyes burned, but this time it wasn't from tears. I had just solved a problem that had stumped our senior developers for weeks. The solution came to me at 3 a.m. while I was still working my cafe shifts to make ends meet. Funny how clarity often strikes when you're not looking for it. "You need to stop making coffee," Rita told me that morning, dropping by the cafe as usual. "Your code is worth more than minimum wage, Ariadne. We have a position opening up, project lead for the Morrison account." I nearly dropped the cup I was holding. The Morrison account, the same one Drake's firm was desperately trying to secure. His legal team had been circling it for months, according to the business news I now followed religiously. "I've been coding for less than a year," I protested, even as something fierce stirred in my chest. Rita just smiled. "And you've already outperformed people with decades of experience. Besides," she paused, sipping her complicated drink, "wouldn't it be interesting to negotiate from the other side of the table?" That evening, I came home to find Luna surrounded by college acceptance letters, including one from Stanford. My brilliant daughter had done it, earned her way into her dream school. But as she hugged me, crying with joy, all I could think about was the tuition costs that would have once been a mere inconvenience to us. "Dad called," Phoenix announced from the doorway, his voice carefully neutral. "He and Sienna want to take us to dinner to celebrate Luna's acceptances. At Nouvelle." Nouvelle, the French restaurant where Drake had proposed 21 years ago, where he now dined with his new wife, who was apparently already showing in her designer maternity wear. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "Mom?" Luna was watching me, acceptance letters clutched to her chest. "We don't have to go." I looked at my children, really looked at them. Luna, so much stronger than I had been at her age. Phoenix, carrying wounds that were finally beginning to heal. Then I glanced at my laptop where the project lead offer letter sat unopened in my email. "Actually," I said, reaching for my phone, "I think we should all celebrate in our own ways. You two go to dinner with your father. I have a business meeting to prepare for." The next week, I walked into the Morrison Group's headquarters, wearing a suit I had bought with my first coding bonus. Not designer, but professional and sharp. As I set up my presentation, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass wall. Gone was the uncertain woman in a barista apron. In her place stood someone new, someone who understood both the corporate world and the cutting edge of technology. Drake's team arrived first, their confidence filling the room like expensive cologne. Then came Drake himself, faltering slightly when he saw me. The necklace's recipient wasn't with him today, probably at one of those luxury prenatal yoga classes she kept posting about on Instagram. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said stiffly, then caught himself. "Miss Zhao." "It's still Sullivan," I replied calmly, enjoying his confusion. "I've been too busy to file the paperwork for a name change. Too busy building something greater than his betrayal, but I kept that part to myself." For the next hour, I watched him work the room with his old familiar charm, the calculated smiles, the perfectly timed jokes, the strategic pauses. His proposal was good, I had to admit that. Safe, traditional, exactly what you'd expect from a top-tier law firm. Then it was my turn. The code I had written at 3 a.m. came alive on the screen, elegant and innovative. Every question they threw at me, I caught and transformed into an opportunity. Every doubt they raised, I addressed with solutions I had built myself. I could feel Drake's stare, could practically hear his thoughts. Who was this woman? Where was his agreeable, supportive ex-wife who had been content to stand in his shadow? By the end of the day, the Morrison Group had signed with us, triple the budget Drake's team had proposed. As I packed up my laptop, he approached me, his expression unreadable. "Ari," he said softly, using my old nickname, "I had no idea you were capable of this." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt the last traces of our old life fade away. "That's right," I replied. "You didn't, but I'm learning that I'm capable of quite a lot of things. And Drake, this is just the beginning. Success, I discovered, has a particular scent. Nothing like the expensive perfume I used to wear, but more like coffee grounds, late-night takeout, and the ozone smell of electronics running hot." A year after the Morrison deal, I sat in my new corner office watching the sun rise over the city, the same view Drake used to have from his law firm, though mine was 3 floors higher. The headlines that morning were particularly satisfying. Tech rising star Ariadne Sullivan secures another major deal. Below it, in smaller print, Sullivan and Associates law firm faces financial troubles. I didn't take pleasure in Drake's struggles. At least that's what I told myself, but there was a certain poetry to it all. "Mom," Luna's voice came through my office speakerphone. "Dad's here at Stanford. He's not doing well." My daughter, now in her first year at college, thanks to my new salary and Rita's generous signing bonus, sounded worried. In the background, I could hear familiar slurred speech. Drake, probably fresh from another failed client meeting. "He keeps talking about the necklace," Luna continued. "Says Sienna pawned it last week. She's left him, Mom. Took the baby and everything." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, remembering the weight of that revelation night in my old kitchen. "Where are you now?" "Student Center. Phoenix is on his way. He was already flying in for my parents' weekend." She paused. "The one Dad promised to attend." I had cleared my schedule for Parents' Weekend months ago, arranged meetings around it, even planned to launch our new project remotely, because that's what mothers do. They show up. "Stay where you are," I said, already packing my laptop. "I'll be on the next flight." I found them in the student center, Luna stress-eating vending machine cookies, Phoenix looking far too adult in his journalism internship clothes, and Drake. Oh, Drake. His designer suit was wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. The great corporate lawyer, undone by the very success he'd chased for so long. "Ari," he slurred, seeing me approach. "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I know I messed up. The firm's failing. Sienna's gone. The baby. I never see the baby." My children watched me, their faces a mix of concern and old pain. This man had shattered our world, emptied our accounts, started a new family, and yet here we were, unable to simply walk away. Because family, I was learning, was complicated. Success meant nothing if it made us as cold as we'd once been hurt. "Come on," I said, taking charge like I'd learned to do. "Let's get coffee." Over the next few hours, as Drake sobered up, a story emerged. His firm had lost clients steadily after the Morrison deal. Younger, hungrier lawyers were outmaneuvering him. Sienna had grown tired of his obsession with work, his desperate attempts to maintain their lifestyle. The final straw was him missing their daughter's first steps because he was trying to save a failing client relationship. "I keep thinking about that necklace," he said, staring into his 4th cup of coffee. How it seemed so important then, the perfect gift to start a new life. Now look at me, no wife, no firm, barely seeing any of my children. Dad, Phoenix spoke up, his voice steady. I'm writing an article about tech industry transformations. Would you would you be willing to be interviewed about adapting to change? The olive branch was subtle but clear. Luna reached across the table, squeezing her brother's hand. Later that night, after we'd gotten Drake into a hotel room and arranged for his sister to fly in, I sat with my children in Luna's dorm room. The cramped space was so different from our old mansion, but somehow felt more like home. You know, Luna said thoughtfully, I used to think success meant having what we used to have, the big house, the fancy cars, the perfect family image. But watching you this past year, Mom, I've learned it's something else entirely. What's that? I asked, curious about my daughter's wisdom. Success is building something new from the ashes of what broke you, and doing it with grace. She smiled. Plus, being CEO looks way better on you than being the perfect wife ever did. I hugged my children close, thinking of the journey that had brought us here. Tomorrow, I'd return to my office, lead my team, continue building my empire. But tonight, I was simply a mother who had learned that true success wasn't about revenge at all. It was about rising so high that your past became nothing more than a stepping stone. Life has a way of bringing things full circle. 7 years after that fateful night with the receipt, I found myself back in my old neighborhood, not to reminisce, but to close a deal. Our company had just bought my former home, the sprawling Victorian mansion where I'd once played the role of perfect wife. But this time I had different plans for it. The Phoenix Foundation's first residential campus, I explained to the board, standing in what used to be my kitchen. A live-in tech training facility for single parents rebuilding their lives. Housing, childcare, education, everything I wished I'd had when I started over. The irony wasn't lost on me that the house Drake had emptied our accounts to keep would now help others who'd been left with nothing. Rita, now semi-retired but still my mentor, smiled from her wheelchair. Her cancer was in remission, but the fight had taken its toll. Speaking of Phoenix, Rita said after the board members left, your son's article about you went viral. From betrayal to billions, a mother's rise in tech. Very catchy. I hadn't read it yet. Phoenix had wanted me to wait until it was published, and this morning it had finally gone live. But before I could respond, my assistant rushed in. Miss Sullivan, you need to see this. Sienna's outside with Drake and their daughter. They stood in the driveway. Drake in an off-the-rack suit that spoke of his new, humbler lifestyle, Sienna looking older and wiser, and between them, a little girl with curious eyes, Hope, now 6, who I'd only seen in social media posts. We saw the article, Sienna said, her voice softer than I remembered, about what you're doing with the house, about the foundation. She paused, twisting her hands. I want to help. I've been taking coding classes at the community college, and maybe I could teach here? I looked at this woman who had once been the catalyst for my world's destruction. She'd grown, just as I had. Life had taught her its own harsh lessons. Drake stepped forward, hope clutching his hand. I've been sober for 2 years now, he said quietly, working as a legal aid attorney. It's not prestigious, but it matters. And when I read Phoenix's article, he swallowed hard. I finally understood what real success looks like. Hope tugged at my sleeve. Daddy says you make computers do magic. Can you teach me too? In that moment, standing in front of my old home with my past and future colliding, I made a decision that surprised even me. Actually, I said, we're launching a coding program for kids, and we need parent volunteers. Later that evening, I finally read Phoenix's article. He'd captured everything, the pain, the struggle, the triumph. But what struck me most was his conclusion. My mother's story isn't about revenge, it's about regeneration. While others sought to diminish her, she chose to multiply. Today, the necklace that once symbolized her betrayal has been sold to fund scholarships. The house that witnessed her tears now shelters others beginning their own journeys. And the woman who was once told she wasn't technical enough is revolutionizing how we think about technology and second chances. I looked around my old home, now being transformed into something meaningful. Workers were installing computers in what used to be the formal dining room. The grand staircase would soon echo with the footsteps of others climbing their way out of rock bottom. My phone buzzed with a group text from Luna. Family dinner tonight? All of us? And I realized that success wasn't just about proving people wrong. Sometimes it was about being big enough to let them be part of what you've built right. Success stories have a way of taking on lives of their own. After Phoenix's article went viral, my inbox flooded with messages from women worldwide sharing similar stories. Each one started the same way. I thought I was alone until I read about you. It made me realize that my journey wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a blueprint for others. I was reviewing these messages late one night in my office when Rita was rushed to the hospital. As I sat by her bedside, holding her frail hand, she smiled that knowing smile I'd first seen in the cafe all those years ago. "Remember when you thought you couldn't code?" she whispered. "Now look at you, running my company, changing lives, making history. I need you to promise me something, Ariadne." "Anything," I said, meaning it. This woman had seen my potential when I couldn't even see myself. "Promise me you'll make it bigger than just you, bigger than revenge, bigger than success. Make it a movement." That conversation sparked what would become our most ambitious project yet. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. My children sat in, Luna, now our chief financial officer, Phoenix heading our communications department. Even Drake was there, quietly contributing his legal expertise to our pro bono programs. "We're going global," I announced. "The Phoenix Foundation will open campuses in every major city, but we're not just teaching coding. We're creating an entire support ecosystem: legal aid, childcare, mental health services, job placement, everything someone needs to rebuild their life." "The cost would be astronomical," one board member protested. I pulled up a presentation on the screen. "Actually, I've been writing code again, a new platform that automates most of our operations, making it scalable and cost-effective. I built it during my insomnia nights. Old habits die hard." Luna grinned, recognizing the late-night coding sessions we'd shared over video chat while she finished her MBA. Phoenix was already typing, probably crafting the press release in his head. "There's more," I continued. "Sienna's coding program for kids has a 6-month waiting list. Drake's legal aid workshops are oversubscribed. We're not just changing individual lives, we're breaking cycles of dependency and despair." As I spoke, I noticed Hope sitting quietly in the corner of the boardroom, working on her coding homework. She'd become a regular fixture in our offices, splitting her time between her parents and the foundation. The daughter of the woman who had once helped destroy my marriage was now one of our most promising young coders. Life's poetry never ceases to amaze me. Later that night, as I was leaving the office, I found a small package on my desk. Inside was a familiar velvet box, but instead of the diamond necklace, it contained a simple USB drive. A note in Rita's shaky handwriting read, "Worth more than diamonds, my entire life's work. Make it shine brighter." I plugged in the drive and found decades of Rita's code, innovations she'd never released, ideas ahead of their time. But what caught my eye was a folder labeled Project Phoenix, dated from the day she first met me at the cafe. She had believed in me from the very beginning, had seen this future when I was still struggling to make lattes. My phone buzzed with a text from Luna. "Mom, you need to see this. They're calling it the Phoenix Effect. Women around the world starting coding boot camps based on your story." Attached was a video montage, women in different countries, various ages, all sharing their stories of rising from adversity. Each one held up a sign with the same message: "Thank you, Ariadne." I sat back in my chair, tears blurring my vision. The scared woman who once found a receipt for a diamond necklace had become a beacon of hope for others. But more than that, she had discovered that true success isn't measured in carats or dollars. It's measured in lives changed, in cycles broken, in futures reclaimed. Rita was right. This was bigger than revenge. This was revolution. They say time heals all wounds, but I've learned it's what you do with that time that matters. 10 years after finding that receipt, I stood on stage at the Global Women in Tech Summit, looking out at an audience of 5,000. In the front row sat my family, not the picture-perfect version I'd once desperately maintained, but the real, complicated, beautiful one we'd become. Luna, now running our international operations, sat beside her fiancé, whom she'd met while launching our European campus. Phoenix, whose documentary about women in tech was winning awards, was filming as usual. Even Drake and Sienna were there, with hope between them, her coding competition medal proudly displayed on her chest. 10 years ago, I began my keynote. I thought finding a diamond necklace that wasn't meant for me was the end of my story. Instead, it was page one of a different book entirely. The screens behind me lit up with statistics. 50,000 women graduated from Phoenix Foundation programs worldwide. Average income increase, 400%. Children's college attendance rate, 89%. But numbers couldn't capture the real impact. The generational cycles broken, the lives transformed, the dreams rekindled. But today isn't about my journey, I continued, my voice strong. It's about announcing our biggest initiative yet. I paused, feeling Rita's absence acutely. She'd passed away 6 months ago, leaving me her company and a handwritten note. Now make it legendary. The Rita Chen Technology Institute will offer full scholarships to 1 million women over the next decade. Not just coding, we're expanding into AI, robotics, quantum computing, areas where women, especially those starting over, have been told they don't belong. The announcement triggered a standing ovation, but my eyes were fixed on Hope, now 12, furiously taking notes on her tablet. She'd recently told me she wanted to be exactly like Aunt Ari when she grew up, words that would have once filled me with bitter irony, but now just made me proud. After the speech, during the reception, Drake approached me holding a familiar velvet box. "Found this in my old office while cleaning out my desk," he said quietly. "Think it's time it served a better purpose." Inside was the original receipt for the diamond necklace, the paper that had shattered my world and ultimately helped me rebuild it stronger. "Perfect," I said. "It belongs in the Foundation's museum, along with my first barista apron and coding textbooks." Luna joined us, champagne in hand. "Remember when we were selling designer clothes to pay bills?" She laughed. "Now we're funding tech empires." Speaking of funding, Phoenix added, arriving with his camera. The documentary's been picked up by Netflix. They want to turn your story into a series. I looked at my children, successful, compassionate adults who had turned our family's darkest chapter into fuel for positive change. At Drake, who had found purpose in helping others navigate legal challenges. At Sienna, now heading our youth coding programs. At Hope, already showing signs of becoming a brilliant programmer. Tell them yes, I decided, but make sure they focus on what matters. This isn't a story about betrayal or revenge. It's about discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best version of yourself. Later that night, in my office overlooking the city, I found an old photo from my previous life. The perfect corporate wife standing in her perfect kitchen wearing a perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. I barely recognized her now. My phone buzzed with a group text from Luna. Family dinner at the house? The coding boot camp graduates want to cook for us as practice for their new catering business. I smiled, remembering all the family dinners I'd hosted in that kitchen, trying to maintain an image of perfection. Now the same space served as a training ground for other women rebuilding their lives, finding their strength, discovering their worth. On my way, I typed back, just finishing something important. I opened my laptop where a familiar piece of code waited, the first program I'd ever written, saved all these years. Below it, I added a new line, // remember, diamonds may be forever, but resilience is priceless. Then I headed home, not to the house where I'd once lost everything, but to the place where countless others were finding their way back to themselves, one line of code at a time. 15 years after that life-changing night, I found myself standing in a familiar spot, our old kitchen, now transformed into a state-of-the-art teaching space. The same counter where I'd once found that receipt now held rows of laptops, each one representing a new beginning for someone else. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mom?" Luna called from the doorway. "The documentary crew wants to film here next. Phoenix thinks it's poetic, starting the story where it all began." My daughter, now expecting her first child, rested a hand on her growing belly. The next generation of our transformed family was on its way, and I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. "Did I ever tell you what really happened that night?" I asked, running my hand along the counter's smooth surface. "Not just about finding the receipt, but about the moment everything changed?" Luna shook her head, settling into one of the ergonomic chairs we'd installed for our coding students. In the background, I could hear the bustling sounds of our latest cohort of students, women from all walks of life, each carrying their own version of my story. "I wasn't just angry or heartbroken," I continued. "I was terrified. Not of being alone, but of being right about something I'd suspected for years, that I'd made myself small to fit into someone else's story. That receipt wasn't just proof of your father's betrayal, it was evidence of my own betrayal to myself." The door opened and Hope bounded in, now a teenager who spent more time coding than on social media. "Aunt Harry, Dad said you're finally telling the real story for the documentary?" Drake and Sienna followed their daughter, both now regular instructors at the foundation. Drake taught legal literacy to our students, while Sienna ran our youth coding program. They'd found their own redemption in helping others avoid the mistakes they'd made. "The real story," I mused, "is that success isn't what I thought it was. It's not about the corner office or the billion-dollar valuations. It's not even about proving anyone wrong." I paused, looking at the family we'd become, complicated, imperfect, but real. "It's about proving yourself right." Phoenix appeared with his camera crew, but for once, he wasn't filming. Instead, he held up a frame, Inside was that original receipt, now yellowed with age, mounted alongside my first line of code. "The museum curator sent this over," he said. "They want it for the Women in Tech exhibition at the Smithsonian. They're calling it the receipt that changed tech." I laughed at the grandiosity of it, but Luna interjected, "It's true, though. That receipt didn't just change your life, Mom. Through the foundation, it's changed thousands of lives. Every woman who walks through these doors has her own receipt, her own moment when she decided to rewrite her story." As if on cue, one of our current students appeared in the doorway. Maria, a former housewife who'd found her own crumpled evidence of betrayal 3 months ago. But instead of breaking, she'd found us. Now she was top of her AI development class. "Miss Sullivan," she said hesitantly, "I just got my first job offer. Senior developer at a Fortune 500 company." The room erupted in cheers, and I watched as Hope hugged Maria, Luna wiped happy tears, and Phoenix instinctively reached for his camera. Drake and Sienna shared a look that spoke volumes about redemption and second chances. "You know what the best part is?" Maria continued, her eyes shining. "They said my age was an asset, that my life experience makes me a better programmer. Can you believe that? Me, a better programmer because of everything I've been through? I could believe it. Every line of code we write is shaped by our experiences, our struggles, our triumphs. In technology, as in life, sometimes the most elegant solutions come from those who've had to rebuild their systems from scratch." Looking around at my beautifully messy, perfectly imperfect family, biological and chosen, I realized that success isn't a destination. It's not even a journey. It's a legacy you build with every choice, every fall, every rise, and most importantly, every person you lift up along the way. They say endings are just new beginnings in disguise. Today, 20 years after finding that receipt, I stand in my office at the Foundation's global headquarters, once Drake's prestigious law firm building. The view is the same, but the woman looking out at the city skyline is unrecognizable from the one who once stood here as a corporate lawyer's perfect wife. The morning news plays quietly on my screen. Phoenix Foundation founder Ariadne Sullivan named Time's Person of the Year. Below that, a second headline, 1 million women worldwide graduate from Phoenix Tech programs. Numbers that once would have seemed impossible to the woman making lattes and studying JavaScript after midnight. "Ready for the 20th anniversary gala?" Luna asks, entering with her 1-year-old daughter strapped to her chest. My granddaughter, already showing signs of her mother's determination, clutches a toy laptop. "Almost," I reply, adjusting my suit, not designer, but tailored with the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her worth. "Is everyone here?" They are, all gathered in the building's atrium. Phoenix, now a celebrated documentarian, with his camera capturing every moment. Hope, at 18, showcasing her award-winning AI project that helps single parents find resources. Drake and Sienna, gray-haired but content, teaching a new generation about second chances. Our graduates, each wearing the Foundation's signature blue blazer, their success stories echoing off the marble walls. But there's one more person I need to honor tonight. I reach into my desk drawer and pull out a small velvet box, not the original one, but a perfect replica. Inside, instead of a diamond necklace, lies a simple USB drive containing the code for our latest initiative, an AI-powered platform that can identify women at risk of financial abuse and connect them with resources before crisis hits. 20 years ago, I begin my speech, a diamond necklace showed me what I'd lost. Today, this USB drive represents what we've all found, our power, our purpose, our community. I look out at the sea of faces, women who've coded their way from rock bottom to triumph, children who've watched their mothers transform, men who've learned to champion change instead of fear it. Success isn't about revenge, I continue, my voice strong. It's not about proving our worth to those who couldn't see it. It's about building something so magnificent that it helps others find their own light. I pause, thinking of Rita, wishing she could see how her belief in a struggling barista had sparked a global revolution. The truth is, that receipt didn't destroy my life. It revealed it. Every tear I cried became fuel. Every doubt became determination. Every setback became a setup for something greater. My family joins me on stage, not just Luna and Phoenix, but Hope too, and all our graduates. This is our real legacy, not the billions in our foundation's accounts, not the awards on our walls, but the lives we've touched, the cycles we've broken, the futures we've reclaimed. So here's to the next 20 years. I raise my glass to every woman holding her own receipt, her own moment of truth, her own crossroads. May you find your strength not in spite of your struggles, but because of them. May you discover, as I did, that rock bottom is not your ending, it's your foundation. Later, after the celebrations wind down, I find myself back in my old kitchen, now a coding classroom. A young woman sits there crying over her laptop just as I once cried over that receipt. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispers. I sit beside her, remembering all the hands that helped lift me when I couldn't stand alone. "Let me tell you a story," I begin. "It starts with a diamond necklace that wasn't meant for me." Because that's the real gift of success. Not the power to rise above others, but the privilege of reaching back to help them rise too. Every woman's journey is different, but the truth remains the same. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that could have happened for you. And as for that receipt, it's framed in our museum now, next to my first line of code, a reminder that every ending holds the seed of a new beginning, and every betrayal carries the potential for transformation. You just have to be brave enough to write your own story, one line at a time.